up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 532. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Germany, it's our special guest, Thoralf Severin. Thoralf, welcome to LR.
What? Oh. Different program. Hi, what's going on?
What's going on, man? It's great to have you on the show. We had a quick chat a little while ago about getting you on, and we were able to put it together pretty quickly. I'm super happy about it.
Yeah, nice to be here.
We're going to do an interview with you today, Thoralf, and of course, go through some of our normal stuff as far as LR goes with Crack a Pack and asking a question, answering a question from a patron and all that. And hopefully we have a good time and learn a lot. Thanks for taking the time to come on the show. We really appreciate it. First things first, got to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. That's the place to go for all things magic related on the old internet there. Also, boy, if you need to sell your cards, this is a place to do it. Channelfireball.com/buy-list. You can go there and you can sell your cards back. You know, you got that pile of draft rares that you're never going to use that don't really go in anything, but they're still legal and standard. That's the time to get rid of those because you can get money for them. Or if you want, you can even trade them in for store credit. They'll give you 30% extra if you trade them in at Channel Fireball for store credit. And it's really easy to do. You just go to channelfireball.com/buy-list, and it works the same way that buying cards does. You search for the card you want. You look at the price. That's the price that they're going to pay you for it. And if that's good, you add it to your cart, and basically you create a full cart of all the cards that you want to sell. Then you package them up, send them into CFB. They will grade them, give you your invoice back with what you're going to get. Once you okay it, you get your money or your store credit in whatever way you want, check or PayPal, so you can get it quickly. And that's it. Super easy to do. And really, I mean, Magic can be an expensive hobby. One of the reasons that we love Limited so much is that it creates that even playing field where you don't have to have all the sweetest mythic rares ever in a set just to be able to compete. You just have to be able to get the packs. Well, this is one way that you can help mitigate that if you're a constructed player, if you're looking to draft with your friends. So please do check that out, channelfireball.com/buy-list. Also, the show is brought to you by you via the Patreon. That's right. You can go on to patreon.com/limited resources, and it's great. You get some cool little perks, and you get to help support this show. Or, on Patreon, most content creators are on there on some level at this point, and I think it's a great way to support the content creators that help brighten your day, maybe make you a little better at your hobby, or anything along those lines. And along with that, you get to ask questions. We've got our Patreon question of the week, and Thoralf and I will be answering that this time. This comes from Harry. Harry says, hello, longtime listener, first-time caller, big fan. My question is, do you value counter spells and entrancing liar in Theros more because of an otherwise unbeatable rare, Dream Trawler? Hey, this is a good question to bring up with you on this show, Thoralf. Or is a chance that you play against it small enough that it shouldn't be a consideration? I'll let you take a stab at this one, Thoralf. Do you value these more reactionary cards because of a specific card in a set like Dream Trawler or some other unbeatable bomb?
Specific? No. Like, I'm not going to take this card and saying, okay, I know there's a certain rare I can never beat. Let's pick it up. But what does happen if you have like a collection of rares, some sets are just more bomby than other sets, then those cards go up. I mean, Liar is kind of a all good around card anyway. You probably never pass it on a certain amount of level, like second, third pick or something. But specifically some counter spells, you always say like, okay, if I'm in a deck where I expect to have not much removal or be like short against something very powerful, you can pick that up for the sideboard and then sideboard it in. And that's probably a good enough react to those good cards. In the end, you probably can't do much really, but at least you have a plan. Like, counting your Sphinx Dream Trawler is one of the best ways to get rid of it.
Yeah, it really is. Especially like you mentioned before, especially if you already anticipate that the archetype you're drafting may not be great and may not have great answers to whatever bomb you're facing. For example, if you're going to be in blue-green or something, let's say you take a couple of early blue-green gold cards or whatever, and you're like, all right, we're blue-green, we're doing it. That deck can have a hard time dealing with certain types of bombs, given the more narrow removal spells, sorcery speed, and that kind of thing that they have access to, where a counterspell can really do a good job. And by the way, I agree with you wholeheartedly on both points, particularly the liar Yeah, sure. Maybe it goes up like, a quarter of 1% or something because there's a couple of bombs like what's it called in it. But it's just a good card. Like
It's just good, yeah.
I take it over basically every common at this point. It's colorless. It scales well with the game. It looks really inefficient. And look, it's not the most efficient removal spell, but flexibility counts. It really does. It matters a lot. And also, it gives you that ability to tap down something where it can't attack you. Keep it locked down. And then on your turn, you can tap down a second thing, and getting 2 blockers out of the way, even if it's face up on the table, can be very powerful where you can set up a way to win the game by doing so. So good question, Harry. Go ahead.
It kind of creates a threat that is not there because you don't have to use it, right? It always lingers like, okay, I could technically do this in order to attack, which is specifically great for flyers because if they have 2 flyers and they want to block yours, they kind of can't attack with that and they're restricted to flyers. A lot of people have ground creatures, so that mostly there are too many anyway over time. But then also, like, the removal scaling up is so good. You can tap down like a 2/1 in the beginning because you don't have a good defense or you have the mana open. Then eventually go up to the 6/7 because you're so flexible on what you can do. You say, okay, now I have a board structure that deals with 3/3. I don't need that anymore. Or you got a better flyer. I can do that.
Yeah, and that is really worth a lot. And the way that it plays out, the Liar isn't as inefficient as it looks when you first read it as well.
No. So, the feeling when you have like you killed something, then next turn they play was, I really would have liked to kill that.
Yes. Oh, that happens all the time, right? Where you're like, oh, if I knew that was coming. And here you're just like, I'll untap my Liar and get busy with it. So great question, Harry. Thanks for that. Let's do a Crack-a-Pack, Thoralf. Let's see. We love to bring, alternate perspectives to the table whenever we can. So we'll see, what your approach to Theros Beyond Death Limited is. This pack, by the way, comes from Christian Bullock. So thank you for that pack given to me at a...
I love cracking packs, just generally.
Oh. You mean to draft, right? That's what you meant. Right?
Oh, and yeah, sure.
To draft with,
not reasonably. Just when we were at the players area in Worlds, they put like random displays on the table. I think they assumed we would draft with them, but they didn't survive long.
Oh no! You guys just went right through them. Oh my god! I knew I felt a disturbance in the force when I was there.
Stuff happened. Nobody really knows what happened, but in the end,
that's what it is. Okay, sure. Wow, this story has gotten muddied very quickly. Okay, let's take a look. First card is Thrill of Possibility. Not going to be thrilled to first pick that one.
Very good, but no. But it is really better than it looked like in the beginning.
Yes, you can definitely play it. It looked like the type of card that they put in effectively for the blue-red deck, right? So that you could do some type of card filtering on your opponent's turn, but it wasn't too powerful where they were putting some instant speed draw spell that would get you way ahead. But it turns out you can just play it. Like you can't just play this card.
Is so important in the graveyard. So you would probably, like, if you have the option to pay 1 to mill yourself 1, you would use that a lot of the times. So.
Yes, and this almost does that. Triumphant Surge. That's the 3 and a white instant. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. You gain 3 life. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Sleep of the Dead. Where are you at on Sleep of the Dead? I've seen some people start to come up on this card a bit, but I have yet to do so.
It's a good escape spell when you have none. Definitely. Like if you see it and you have no in your deck, you have to always pick it because you need to have something in your deck that uses the graveyard as a resource. That being said, it's probably better in an aggressive deck than in a defensive deck. Although I've seen it sideboard a lot when your opponent is really aggressive and you just need to stabilize a few times, like over a few turns. I've tried a black-blue really aggressive deck with only 1 and 2 drops that plays this one a lot, and the Fruit. Like the things
Fruit of Tyzerus?
Yeah, you can table them. Man. Like you can plan and you get like 2 of each. And since you have a lot of milling cards that kind of go medium to late-ish, you can build a deck. It's a little bit unstable, but it's a very good deck if it comes together because you're really fast.
Oh, that's cool. I have not seen that one. The deck that I did see somebody talking about this with was Kyle Rose, who's usually at or near the top of the standings on Arena, using this with Towering Wave Mystic in blue-red. For similar reasons to what you described, where Sleep of the Dead and the Tower Wave Mystic, you can wheel those. You can get as many of those as you'd like. Nobody really wants to put those in their deck. But apparently, you can get down the Mystic, use Sleep of the Dead to lock down a blocker, attack with the Mystic, and then use it to fuel further Sleep of the Deads and just keep the damage flow.
Yeah.
So,
and those are, So if you don't have an escape card and you're like mid-second booster, you definitely should pick one.
There you go. Next is Nylea's Forerunner. That's the 4 and a green 5/3 trampler that gives everybody trample. Nice little 5-drop,
Hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not the one you're picking here, but Soul Reaper of Mogus, similar. That's the 2/3 for 2 and a black that you can sack creatures to draw cards. Setessan Skirmisher, I have really not liked this card. People keep playing it against me, but every time they do, I'm like, oh, thank God, they're just playing a stupid Skirmisher. It's the 1 and a green 2/1 with Constellation. It gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Where are you at on the Skirmisher? Do you play that card?
I try not to. Most of the time, I would say it lands like 40% in your deck, maybe a little bit lower. It's really not great.
When you need a 2-drop or whatever.
Yeah, there are so many better 2-drops, specifically in enchantment decks, so hopefully not in our deck.
Yeah, I'd rather have a Skola Grove Dancer than that, which doesn't really say a whole lot. Next is Erois's Blessing. There's a first pickable card. That's the 3 and a red enchantment that gives a creature +1/+1 and does 4 damage to a creature an opponent controls when it ETB. So nice little removal spell there. Got something at least. Funeral Rites, 2 and a black sorcery, draw 2, lose 2, and mill 2. I do like that card, but I would take Blessing over it. You?
Yeah, you just pick the removal spell, and then it's also really good as an enchantment, getting it back, getting it with Pilgrim, getting it back with some cards. It's just so good.
Okay, well, now I get to throw a little bit of a question at us here. So you mentioned just take the removal. I like that. That's what I would do too. Well, what if there's another piece of removal? So there's also Dreadful Apathy in this pack. Which one of those do you like better?
I would pick Apathy because white is a better color for me as red. I like white a lot. Specifically, white enchantments are very important because of the Wayfinder, which I think is a very solid card. Like in the very beginning, I drafted basically always mono white aggressive decks, which had like 4 of those because people didn't rate them highly enough. And then you just play any enchantments, even like the 2/4, the Nyxborn Courser. Like it just was so easy to draft a deck consistently, and getting apathies because people took apathies, but having those actually meant that the deck has some good cards as a removal spell. It has better synergies with the Flicker of Fate. It has synergies with Rise from Glory. It's just in a better color for what it does.
Yeah, and it's also just a better card, right? Like Dreadful Apathy kills effectively any creature where Erosis Blessing doesn't. Some of the bigger creatures don't die to it. Admittedly, there's not a ton of them, but there are some. And, it's easier to interact with generally as well. You can do a pump spell or something to save your creature. Apathy's just like, you're done.
That is true, though the +1/+1 actually is a lot of like value. True. Specifically like in the 4 power metas theme. So they both have their upsides, but I think just looking at it closely, the white one edges that out.
All right, so we've got Dreadful Apathy currently. Here's Eidolon of Philosophy, which we're not going to be taking. That brings us to our uncommons. We've got Mischievous Chimera. That's the blue-red 2/2 flying enchantment creature, and whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, it does 1 damage to the opponent, and you scry 1. Good card, but I wouldn't take it over Dreadful Apathy, would you?
No. You don't see where you are. You want a monocolor card. It's even if you are red blue. Sorry, I'm not even sure you would probably just take the removal spell over it anyway.
Yeah, the Rose's Blessing. Next is another gold card. It's Rise to Glory, which has actually gone up quite a bit in my estimation. That's the 3 black-white sorcery. Choose one or both. Return a target creature and aura from your graveyard to the battlefield. I looked at this card and thought, oh, it's fine when I first saw it, but you really can get both cards like pretty often in the format, like more than half the time you get both. And when you do, oftentimes it's getting back a creature and a removal spell just because of the way that the format plays out with cards like Dreadful Apathy and Myers Grasp and such. in these colors. So I actually really like Rise to Glory. I still wouldn't take it, though, over the Apathy. It's more important to have the removal spells and stay in one color for me than to take a high upside card like Rise to Glory.
I agree.
At this point. Okay.
The
next,
one upside that card has is because you mill yourself a lot from cards like the 3/3 Death Touch guy or the 2/1 and stuff, you end up with having sometimes your best cards in the graveyard. So having an option of getting them back is also really valuable.
Oh, yeah. That does go a long way. Wow. Here's another good card. This one is Destiny Spinner. This is the 1 and a green 2/3 enchantment creature. It says creature and enchantment spells you control can't be countered, which, by the way, everybody always forgets about that. And then it also has an activated ability of 3 and a green to make one of your lands an XX elemental creature token with trample and haste, where X is the number of enchantments you control. It's just until end of turn, but still, that's something that can happen occasionally in the late game. You can make a 3/3 or a 4/4 attacker. But really, it's a 2/3 enchantment creature for only 2 mana. That's already good. And then it just has all this extra upside that comes up occasionally. I really like Destiny Spinner a lot.
It's very nice for what it brings, but I feel like both of the effects are kind of flavor text because they both don't come up as much as you think they would. Not countering comes it's okay, it happens sometimes. When it does come up, it's really important. But really, at one point, you have to draw it and play it, and then the effect. And once you want to animate your lands, it's really super late. And then sometimes you think, I don't even want to animate my land. I want to cast an escape spell. I don't want to hold up that mana. So the ability is fine, don't get me wrong, but I still feel like the card looks better than it is.
Yeah, I find it to be rock solid. Like, that's how I would describe it. Yeah, but that does not mean over the top powerful. That just means there's nothing to not like about the card, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Ooh, all right. Well, I think we can ignore the rest of the pack because we've got a nice rare here. We've got Nadir Kraken. That's the 1 blue 2/3 Kraken. And whenever you draw a card, you can pay 1 mana. If you do, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and you make a 1/1 blue tentacle creature token. This card's sweet.
I've seen that card win games on its own. Just like that. Play this, pay a mana every turn. Sometimes you have to protect it if they do something, but you have a lot of stuff like the blue mantle and stuff, and then you just wait. And if it survives, I mean, there's nothing happening to it. It's so good.
Yeah, it's so good. It gets so big that it outclasses some of the removal within a turn or two, like Eros's Blessing and even Myers Grasp, after a short while. And then beyond that, it just spits out this huge board. It makes it so difficult for your opponent to mount any type of offense on the ground. And it just starts slamming into them. I mean, it's certainly worth the mana, the 1 mana. And you can even do cool stuff because it's whenever you draw a card, you're going to do that basically every turn on your draw step. But of course, there's other ways to draw cards in the board.
So I think I would pick that.
Yes, I would do the same. Yes, so we're going to take Nadir Kraken, and I will put that in the giveaway pouch thing that I have here as well. Also, we got a goat token. I do like that goat token, the John Finkel token, if you will. Okay, Thoralf, let's get into our discussion with you because we've got a bunch of cool stuff to talk about. First things first, tell our listeners what your background is with Magic and with Limited specifically.
So I've played Magic for a long time. I started around Nemesis, which is way longer, way longer before than I want to admit. No, it's fine. And then I played, we have a store and we play basically every week 2 drafts at least, and then countless drafts on Magic Online and stuff. Because as you said, Limited is very easily accessible if you don't want to put in the cards and the hours of work for testing Constructed. And I mean, let's be honest, Magic players are on the lazier side of human beings, so building a constructed deck and playing it all over again is kind of a bit of a stretch sometimes. But you can start a draft. You go into a draft, it fires, you play it, great. So I was always on the side of Limited just for convenient reasons, and just Magic changing it all the time is so great. And then you just walk through all the formats that have been in Magic, and you end up now in Theros.
That's right. Well, I've seen that you've actually ended up writing a bunch of articles and stuff about Limited and Magic in general, but a lot of it's about Limited. How did you come around to that?
So I usually we play a lot of limited, and we in Berlin have a lot of very good limited players. So it's fairly easy to trade informations and to ask people and to grow from that. There was a GP
Mm.
where we finished first and second, like a team limited GP, which was really fun. And then
Wow.
it's Berlin is not the worst in limited reasons.
Jeez, that's impressive. Yeah, that's a good run. Where was the GP held?
Florence, I think.
In Florence, and you guys went over there and just smashed it, huh?
Yeah, so it's because like people like to talk a lot and like to talk about limited and are actually like listening to it. Limited is very interesting because you can talk over so many booster packs. I mean, just put in a first pink first pack and you can probably talk for hours about something. So
Yes, I am aware of this phenomenon.
yeah, yeah. And then you just writing about stuff. I always liked sharing information and talking about it. And back then, the internet was more about writing than actually listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing for a German website, and then started writing for an English written website. And the the skill set that is important and limited is very difficult to assess, I think, when you're starting from the beginning. That's why this show is so awesome, because like you listen to it and you get something told that you never really thought of, and then you just learn from your experience. And it's so much easier to learn if somebody tells you what is good when they already experienced it. And this is it's just very enjoyable that people like your content.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I noticed that on one of your articles, you actually talked about content and how it plays a role. You kind of contrasted it in a really interesting way. On one hand, you noted that given how much content there is now about Magic available to every player, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of has almost become the baseline, like like yes, there's more content available and that makes the average player better, but if everybody is reading and listening to that content, that kind of becomes the norm, right?
Yes, exactly. And the limited always rewards you for thinking a bit further than what other people think. Like especially specifically in drafting, when everybody thinks black is the best color and they say, okay, we have to be in black a lot of the times, you just go on the different side of the scale because it's self-correcting. And that goes
Mm.
within the color for certain cards. If they think like this card is better than the other card, you can adjust to that, or just generally like a certain magic feeling. Like I'm on the side that people bluff way too few, like really, really almost none. So
Hmm.
like one of my like things is like if my opponent plays a mythic rare and that's the only thing I can block, you attack. It doesn't matter what you have, right? So
Yes,
so
yes.
so if that has an orange symbol and you have like a common, then there's no way that they're blocking when they're 20. And this is like the way you can portray information through all of this is just right. And in order to portray information, other people don't write in articles because like everything is basic info, but sometimes you just need to have a little more spice to it, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's the interesting part. Like as a content producer from my perspective, and I'm sure for yours as well, as somebody who produces content for this stuff, you really do it. Like it's a challenge that we have on this show, for example, right? Which is that we want to, and the good news is we have enough time and episodes and stuff to be able to cover more than just one aspect of a thing. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that players have a solid fundamental base, right? So that
Yeah.
they understand the basics of what they're doing. Because if you go to a local game store and there's a draft going on and you go, hey, can I look at your deck? And you just go around the table and look at everybody's deck. You're going to have, maybe 2 or 3 experienced players who have, really solid decks. And you're like, hey, nice job. That looks good. It worked out for you, whatever. Right amount of lands, good mana base, all that kind of stuff. But there's probably going to be 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 of them that really don't know what they're doing. They either never bothered to learn or they're relatively new to it.
Mm-hmm.
And their deck is going to be, you would we would describe it as unplayable, right? Like they have cards in it that just don't do anything. They have a non-functional mana base where it's like, well, I only played 13 lands, but I really didn't want to cut these other cards, or, something like that. Or
like
they
a
don't
3-color Esper deck with one Dream Trawler.
3-color deck with, something like that as an example. Yeah. Wow, that was brutal. But yeah, and then you'll get the people in the middle who are kind of trying to learn. Maybe they have they know to play 17 lands, but they've still got cards, non-bows in their deck, or cards that don't really add to their plan. Maybe they're playing a control deck and they're just like randomly jamming Underworld Chargers or something, where it's just like, well, this doesn't really jive, and you could play this other card that would be better, that kind of thing. And for us, we want to cover everybody, right? Like we want that new player to be able to find our podcast and say, okay, I can search through some episodes or pick up some stuff from like my conversation with you this episode or whatever that would help them, get to that fundamental base. And then the middle ground players kind of cover both. And then the high end players, so we want to help them too. Like we're, later this week, we're going to do an episode on Sealed. And, in many ways that's aimed at the players that are going to be playing at Grand Prix Reno, which is coming up this weekend, and any other, GPs. Those are advanced players, right? These are players that are going out, spending money to travel and pay to go into a big tournament. And, we don't want to leave those players in the dust at all either. So I find it really interesting because the way you framed it in your article really was kind of eye-opening for me, which is that if you're one of those mid or high level players where you're like, you're into this is kind of a hobby that you take seriously. And, you probably are if you're listening to the show and doing that. It is kind of the baseline, right? Like if you don't partake in content, if you just like ignore our show or any of the other limited podcasts out there, or read articles, or just at least try to figure out something about what's going on when the set comes out to give yourself sort of a baseline, you will fall behind. I mean, you are not going to be able to keep up with people who are consuming content on a regular basis at this point.
So one thing from the content point of view, you basically have two dials you can use. You can use very basic content, and Magic, you need basic content. Like it's not that you can play Magic without knowing the basics. You have to know the basics. But displaying the basics is very important, specifically for somebody who starts the game. So if you are able to portray something very basic in a very interesting and fast to learn way, that's so good for them to learn. One specific example would be like the quadrant theory, right? So this is a very important, even high-level thinking of a game, which you broke down to something that is very accessible to somebody, even if they just already started or like are going to be in that level. And that makes like content so good if people can pick it up, even though they might not really know about it as much as they could,
Right.
And then once you go to the very professional way, just going to, that's probably what is Louise's for, but generally just explaining some stuff that other people might not even think about, and then going from there. It's like the combination is so important. And if you want to excel at something, you probably have to pick one or the other, or be very good at both. Right. And what you're saying with the learning stuff from content, that's super important, because let's say you're a very good player. Like I say you're top 50 or something. That doesn't mean that you cannot learn from anybody ever. Like, doesn't mean that a player that is in the top 1,000 can't get you anything that you can learn. That's a very, very wrong thinking, because they might not be on average be as very good as you are, but that doesn't mean that their opinion is worse. Like on everything, they probably have a better opinion on a lot of topics that you wouldn't even consider about that. And if you just be open to, like, I listen to a lot of limited podcasts, like three in total, for example, which probably is more than my time allows, but that's just how it is. And and most of the stuff I go through is like, that is obvious that I would remember, but sometimes maybe once every podcast or stuff, I was like, oh wow, I didn't think about that card this way, or I think about like building a deck like this or having this thing that is beneficial, that is really interesting to me. And then I got rewarded for listening to it, even though I probably would have not changed anything for the other rest of the podcast.
Right. Yeah. Because, and you're an extreme case, right? I mean, you're a Mythic champion. You're an advanced player. You have a lot of experience. You've been playing for a very long time. You represent even further than in the example I gave of somebody who, I mean, you make your own you're basically an expert in the field, so you know what's up. But it's really good that you're still keeping your mind nimble like that and listening to other sources to try to pick what you can out of it. And that kind of brings me to my next question, which I really thought was cool. You have actually kind of broken down absorbing new information in almost you kind of broke it down almost like in a quantifiable way, which I thought was a really interesting approach. Like, for example, I wonder if our audience has ever thought, what percent better do I get? How much match win percentage do I get by doing certain things? Right. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, listening to a podcast like this one, or reading articles, or, let's say you do your own set review and then compare it to somebody else's that you trust or whatever. Each of these things ostensibly is making you better Magic player and better at that set and better at limited in general, that you should see an improvement in your match win percentage at some point along those lines, right? You actually kind of broke it down by you were estimating, of course, but you were breaking it down by, small percentages adding up to something. But I think the really important part that you mentioned that really stood out to me was the acceptance that even if you did all of these things, and even if you added up all of the little 0.5%, 1%, whatevers, it still wasn't getting you to this, you weren't going to get to 90. Right?
No.
It was a bunch of small percentages. Can you talk to us about how you view learning and how it translates to your performance?
So Magic is kind of a unforgiving game, right? You can be as good as you want. Eventually, some games, draws, drafts. Let me tell you, some drafts don't go your way, right? They might be some very most important drafts in the history of the universe, but some just don't go your way.
We will touch on that, don't worry.
So, and then people always go like, okay, in the end, could have done more, could have tried harder, done that. And the answer is always, yes, you could have, but is that actually a reflection of what you wanted to do while doing it? Because when you're successful, it's very easy. I won the tournament. That was so good. I trained for it. Great. Right. But if you didn't, well, then you go like, maybe I should have done more. And then it's very important at the time where you're consuming articles, thing that you feel good at what you're doing, being happy. It's okay. I feel like I need to see more drafts happening. So we go on the Coddler's Twitch thing and watch some drafts. That's actually a lot of the stuff I did before was just going through every VOD of 10 hours and just watched every draft. And if I was interested in the draft, then I would also watch the matches. Like if I see a deck that I don't like as much, but he was very thoughtful of it, liked it, then would see that, okay, how does it play out? Why is it better than I think? And then whatever you do for a certain Magic thing, you gain information. Like when you play a match, sometimes this thing has reached, or this has the line can't be countered, right? That probably adds like 0.0%, like 1% to your overall match winning percentage, but it does. So at one point, this is probably a curve that ebbs up over time. Like there is a certain scale you can't go over, but the more you do, you get there. But the steep is slowing down a little, right? It makes it your hundreds limited match is not as good as your 50s, for example. Like you learn a lot more from 1 to 10 and so. So you have to be very careful in what you can do to yourself in order to say like, okay, I did a lot for the tournament and I am very proud of myself, even though I lost.
Yeah, and to me, it gets really interesting because, as you said, it gets steeper, right? Like there's this scale where if we look at the players who are relatively new, let's go back to the example I used about, I go into a local game store and I say, okay, everybody, let me see your deck. Let me see what you drafted, right? If you're a newer player and you hand me your deck, I could probably, like, if you listened to me and did what I said, I could probably get you like 30%. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like you could probably go from, 20 to 50 or something like that. Right. If you put 17 lands in your deck, stuck to 2 colors, had a good mana curve, didn't play cards that just didn't do anything or didn't belong in your deck at all.
Because everything adds up to this point.
Right. And if I told you literally as a robot, use every mana you can every turn. Just
Yeah.
do those things. And all of a sudden you go from 20% to 45, right? Like just because, all of a sudden when you play a card, it actually affects the board and you can block with it, right?
Yeah.
Or attack with it or whatever, where, you're playing all these goofy cards that don't do anything or, you've seen it before, I'm sure. Fundamental misunderstanding of how the game works. For example, when it comes to deck building, right? I've seen people play 4 equipment in a deck with 8 creatures.
Yeah.
It's like you have almost as many equipment as right. It just that doesn't work out,
Or splashing like a double color card with like two basics. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And no fixing whatsoever, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
This does happen, right? And they're
But
like, well, maybe I'll just draw it.
No, it's big.
Good. Haven't you seen this card before?
Yeah.
Right. And, or playing 13 lands because you couldn't cut, or playing 48 cards because you couldn't figure out what to do, but not adjusting your, all of these things, right? Like if you wipe those off the table, I can get you that much. Now let's go to the other end of the table where you've got the experienced player, maybe one of the better players in the shop, and they've got a good curve and they've got the thing. Now I could say, hey, you're playing Underworld Charger in this blue-black deck, but you don't really have that much self-mill, and you really are kind of lacking in card draw. Like, I would put Funeral Rites that you have in your sideboard in instead of that because you've already got this finisher in there. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. And, they make that change. Well, what did I give them there? 1%? 0.5%, maybe less. I mean, it's not, it matters, right? Like this is what being a pro is. We have to scrap for
that's all you can do.
Percentages.
Yes.
Yeah, that is what you can do. But the amount of difference between, if my advice was correct in both cases, one of them could be 20%, one of them could be 1%, right? And that's the thing that you have to accept as you move further and further up the scale. And I love it that, because that's what you're doing with your actions, right? You're saying, look, I'm going to listen to an hour of podcast and I'm hoping to get one thing out of it, right? Which is going to be a quarter of a percent or less or something like that for that format. Right. And you're watching 10 hours of drafts, right? And, that's work. That's, that takes patience and time, and you could be doing whatever you wanted with that time, right? And instead, you're watching all these drafts. But again, there's probably going to be half of those drafts that you're like, yeah, that's black green, and they took the good black green cards similar to what I would have done, and I didn't really get anything out of that, right? And then, but then somebody drafts, let's say, the blue red deck like we were talking about before, where they're putting things to sleep and they're using the Towering Wave Mystic, and you're like, oh, like I've never seen this build before. And then you watch that play out and you go, okay, if I happen to be in a seat where blue red is the thing, I know that I can do this as an option. And then you've gained, again, a small percent, because how often does that actually happen? Well, not that often. But I really wanted to highlight that you correctly pointed out, and I think also accepted, right, that if I'm going to continue to improve at this, you are well past the point of diminishing returns, as we say, and you are scrapping it out for like the tiny little percentages at this point. You kind of have to embrace that, don't you?
Yeah, it's basically in every professional sport. The higher you go, the less difference is between really good players and very great players, right? And that's, you have to, 1%, they're so important. What I like, the thing that I'd like to imagine, like, do you know Formula One, the thing?
Oh, yes. Oh, you mean car racing Formula One?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course. I love Formula One. Yeah.
So whenever they say like, oh, there was like a huge gap of 1 second, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you're like, I just counted to 1, and that doesn't really feel like a lot of time. Yes. But for them, because it's on such a low margin, it's so important to get that 1/10 of a second even, that it just displays how important improving on a very low scale is. And it's something that's outside. The learning is very difficult because it's very easy to look at stuff and feel you learned something because you saw it, but you never really picked it up. It's like, oh, I watched a draft. Like that happens all the time. You watch a draft and it's like, oh yeah, I would have picked that. I would have ended with a next draft or something. So, but what I realize is, specifically for me, definitely, but also talking to people, is that whenever you try to learn, you have to be aware that you want to learn. And if you're looking at a draft, you say, okay, there's a first pick. You actually think about what you pick before they do a decision. Because what happens if they do it after, you do it after, it's like, okay, I like this card, I pick this. And then you go like, oh yeah, that's the decision. I probably also would have picked it. But if you go like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I probably would have taken the apathy in our first booster from the beginning.
Uh-huh.
And then they pick like the kraken and you say like, oh wait, I would have picked something different. Why do they pick this? Then you're instantly having like a clash in your mind. But if it works the other way, they pick a kraken and it's like, oh yeah, that seems like a good, I probably also would have picked it. You're foregoing that option of learning something or learning about it.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good approach. Yeah, that's great. How would you describe your approach to card evaluation?
It's a how do you call that? Like a zigzag line, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's a number what that card is worth. That is counts for every card in every Magic format, Magic in general. So, and your goal is to go to close to that value as possible. And getting there doesn't get there. Okay, that card looks good. It's like a 98% good card or something. You will play it.
Mm-hmm.
It will overperform or underperform, and then you play it the next time, adjusting to that. And eventually, you will play it as much as you feel like it's worth, and you will go. You will narrow it down to a certain point. But the problem is that is only for you. So you kind of biased specifically when something ends up really bad or really good at the beginning. My example is I played Farrakhan Spawn in the beginning of Theros, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
played it like in 3 drafts. I used it, it died, it came back, my opponent sacrificed the 2/1 Piper or like a supploring token or a Kraken or whatever, and it somehow
Mm-hmm.
just gumbled on the floor and didn't do anything. I really didn't like that card at all. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was passing it through the boots and saying like, yeah, that's not good. And then eventually I picked up like from friends of mine and from videos like your podcast and stuff like that card is probably the best uncommon in the set. And I was like, wait a minute. That's not how I felt. That's not what I envisioned the card to be. Because I really literally had the card in the booster pack. Like I'm picking like that Maya's Grasp over because I didn't feel like it did anything. But then eventually from your experience and from other experience, you settle down on something that's an agreement on how good a card is, and that's probably very close to the truth if you pick multiple different opinions.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part, right? Because we have to face the fact that in our game, we are almost always dealing with insignificant sample
Yes,
sizes,
yeah.
right? We're applying a thick layer of intuition and experience on top of the sample size that we actually get to play with it. Because, yeah, even for like an uncommon, like what you said, I mean, you just don't get to see and or play with those uncommons that often. I mean, even if you've drafted the format a lot, you may have only got to play with it 8, 9, 10 times by now. And early in a format, it might have been 1 or 2.
Yeah,
Right.
and then you have to draw
you have
it.
to extrapolate. Yeah. You have to draw it, play it. And then, even then you only get to see it in one specific scenario.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's where
And that card
experience.
can be bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where experience comes in. Feeling like assessing a card from the beginning. That's why those beginning of set like grade values are so important. And people go like, "Oh, but can you really be right?" And it's like, yeah, you're not right on all the cards. You're basically right on most of the cards. And people say, like, "Oh, but this one was like a B, but you said it was a D." And it's like, yeah, I couldn't know about everything that's probably about the format, but since your experience gives you so much way of how to use a card and where to use it and like give you the thinking about it, it's so much better than to just blindly go in something. It's like, okay, I try this card without any reason.
Yeah. That is, of course, why we like on our set review, why we do those grades. And I feel like it's a really interesting double-edged sword,
Yeah.
giving the grades because on one hand, we mention it every time we do the set review, but we really try to hammer home to our listeners. And this is, boy, it is the difference between really understanding how to use information and how not. It's that on one hand, if you take the grade as the only thing that matters and as gospel, you are not doing this right, right? This is, in our case, Luis and I's first impression of a card. Given a little bit that we know about the set, but, usually not having played it yet means that it's not entirely in a vacuum. It's not just like we're viewing this card with no context whatsoever, but it's with compromised context.
It's a very good starting point.
Yeah, and that if you use is such a boon, especially the players who don't play as often as you and I do, where they might show up and I'll listen to the set review, go do a pre-release or two, play a couple of drafts within a week or two, and then they kind of put it down and wait for the next set to come out. There's a lot of players like that, especially for limited, and they can stand to gain a lot because they can get caught up really quickly to a reasonable starting point. But for people like you and I who are going to be drafting the set over and over and over again, you have to have a running dialogue with basically every card, right? Yeah. Every single card in the set you need to be kind of talking to it and going, have you really done well for me lately? And it's like, yeah, I did. You're like, okay, you're still an A, right? But if it, it does fail you, you have to be willing to do it. And then of course, the thing that makes limited interesting forever basically is context, right? Like I could tell you, a card that performs really, really well in a certain context and really underperforms outside of that context. And finding those, of course, is, I think is part of what you were talking about when you were saying you were watching other people draft or listening to a podcast. This is where we can really get into the nitty gritty. Yeah. And we can start saying, hey, Towering Wave Mystic, that card sucks, but if you combine it with this and this, maybe it's actually pretty good. And now you have context, right? Where every other scenario, you don't want to touch that card, but there's this one spot where it performs or does a little bit.
I also feel like Theros is a set that really needs a lot of context as a set. And I feel like a lot of people have been struggling with it a lot because it's very context heavy. Specifically in the common slot, there are some comments that are just very good, right? You have all your removal spells and some just very solid comments. But going through that layer of awesomeness, you have so many cards that are on the same level. It's just really, really interesting how cards change depending on first or second pick or just general the state of your draft. So it really happens a lot, like to me, that you look at the third booster and you're like, I have no idea what I want to pick here. Like there's like 4 different picks and it's like pick 3, which usually doesn't happen because like you have your first pick order and that usually applies to like around pick 5 or 6 and then you're solid. And then, but there's like, there's so many options and it's so interesting. That's why I really love the format because there's so much, like it's so dynamic on what you already have.
Yeah. Oh man, I've been loving this format, by the way. I wasn't the hugest fan of Throne of Eldraine, but this one has really hit for me. I have been drafting it basically nonstop. Before we talk about worlds, one more question for you, sort of in a more general sense. If you gave our listeners one piece of advice that you think would help them the most, what would it be?
So that also kind of edges to what we said before. So let's say you have your group of friends and you maybe assessing you're the best one out of your group or your prey group. That doesn't mean you can't learn anything or you have no chance of getting better. Because if you're honest or if you're realistically like watching it, Magic is separated into a lot of different skills, right? I mean, it's not about just limited and standard. It's also about drafting a deck, building a certain archetype, using like cards that you want to splash with, bluffing, assessing if you want to attack or not, all of those things, right? There's so many different skills, you can never name them all. And at some things, everyone maybe if they're around your playgroup, is better at something. I guarantee you, if you're talking to somebody on roughly like the same area, somebody knows more about one thing. And your goal as a player is to assess what people are good at and why they think it is this way. Like what makes them think about it better than you do. And that makes you learn like that. If you achieve that correctly, you're basically a super human being of everybody you know. Because
then you get all their superpowers together.
Yeah, and that's great. Like I don't know if you remember, but there was a girl drafting 6-0 back in Pro Tour Venice, Iris Schwartz, which she's also from Berlin, and she is very good at drafting control decks, like really insanely good. She has some major downsides on some other things, but she was very good. And I talked to her, like, why does this work? And she explained it to me, and then I actually won a PTQ drafting control because of what she told me. And I mean, realistically, assessing both, we would have said I'm the better player. But in this case, she was much better than I am. I was willing to learn from that specific thing. And that goes to so many different levels of Magic. And if you're looking for something to learn, there's always something to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, let's talk about Worlds. This is everybody wants to hear from your perspective, your seat, because you had the most crazy roller coaster ride and insane. I have to say, you probably had like the most insane limited experience ever for anybody. First things first, we should set the stage. So you qualified for the World Championship by winning Mythic Championship IV. And so that puts you in that seat. Now, the majority of the rounds at the World Championship were standard. And it had this kind of weird, pretty complicated bracketing type setup for the structure of the tournament. But very importantly, and I was really happy to see this, by the way, Wizards of the Coast decided to put the draft as the opening round. There was one draft done. It actually was done in real life with real cards because the client currently doesn't support drafting 8-person queues, though they have said that they're going to bring that later this year. So you drafted in real life and then built your deck on Arena to play against the other players. But the thing that wasn't clear to me until I actually got into the building was just how insanely heavily weighted these draft rounds were in comparison to the standard rounds. Can you explain that to us? And then also tell us if you understood that going in or how clear that was to you?
So we got the stages schedule a bit earlier than the public, of course, because we had to get to like know it. And I looked at the thing and it had like a huge scroll button, so I didn't read it. So there's nothing changing in Magic than you want to win your match of Magic, right? No system in the world cannot make me want to win a match. So I didn't really care about it. And then once we got to the point where people talked about the systems, like that draft is so important because like you go to the upper bracket and then if you win 2 more rounds of standard, you're done for like the next day and all this stuff. I really realized, and I was very excited, that draft was so heavily impacted in this format. Mm-hmm. It's by no question the most valuable draft of all time so far. Like that's
not even remotely close, right? No. I mean, there is nothing. The closest thing you could get would be when they had draft as the top 8 for the Pro Tours. Going back about 8-10 years or whatever, they did that for a little while. And yeah, make no mistake, those were high stakes drafts. But this was $1 million tournament for 16 players, and somehow these draft rounds, if you were able to pick up the 2 wins in the draft rounds and project yourself forward into the upper bracket particularly, it had a profound impact on your equity in the tournament. It was absolutely insane, such that the players who did escape those early rounds, there was 4 of them that went to the upper bracket, and then that left at the end of the day 8 players who would compete the next half day in the lower bracket, and then they would kind of get mixed in together. We started seeing on Twitter that people were mapping out the tournament equity. Yeah. And, to do tournament equity, basically you assume that everybody is a 50-50, and then you run out the tournament like as a model to see, well, who has the highest percent chance to win going forward. And there was some weird stuff that happened, primarily that those 4 players that made it to the top each had a 23% or really 24% percentage to go, which left, so they each had almost a quarter of the field in equity, and then that left 8% left over, and those 8% went to the remaining 8 players, meaning that they had just under 1% each to actually win the tournament. Crazy. And this was based primarily off of winning your 2 draft rounds. I mean, maybe it was too much, but I liked it that the draft carried more weight. Perhaps this was a little much, but wow. I mean, can you tell us your mindset sitting down for that draft with that? I mean, I get it. You're saying, look, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to try to win my matches, but holy crap, dude. That's like the biggest draft in the history of Magic, and it's not close, and it will be forever the biggest draft that's ever happened. I guarantee that.
Oh, interesting. Well, maybe next words they go better. I don't want to be much of a downer, but I really didn't care much. Like, ever, like since winning Barcelona was so added value for free that I wasn't much excited about the tournament in the form of heartbeat racing stuff, right? I was really happy that I doing it. It was a fun experience. But for me, it was like sitting down, doing a draft, something I always love, and just ignore all the stage really and just go through it in like a fun perspective way. And it probably also helps a lot to not make some silly mistakes or like being super excited. But I think if somebody tells me, it's like, okay, you're picking right now this card that is probably worth $1,000, or you're making like this play that is worth like $100, and then you just go crazy. So I try not to think about it that much. But I mean, in the end, looking back at it, if you're 1-1 in the matches of the thing, that match you played probably had like a $50,000 to $80,000 equity. Like,
yes.
Crazy.
When you think of it like that, it's just absurd.
I mean, look at, you go to people, it's just like, hey, what are you doing for fun? It's like, okay, I like to play like silly card game matches for multiple tens of thousands of dollars. And what do you?
What are you up to? Yeah. It's just incredible.
I like painting fruits or something. Also cool.
Yeah, that's good too. How did you feel preparation wise coming into the tournament? Were you pretty comfortable with the format and all that?
Yeah, so drafting was also important for Players Tour before. So I managed to get a lot of drafts in the very beginning and then in the very end, because like see what changed maybe in card evaluation. But I was very happy with the drafts experience and when I go into the drafts. And then standard is kind of a bit of a, I mean, I don't really like constructed that much, but like playing boards is awesome. But I know that I have to put in more effort, and I played a lot of standard and actually really enjoyed this current form of standard. And
it was good.
Yeah. What I usually did was, because none of my friends were really interested in standard at that time, I went to friends of mine. They were drafting and playing whatever they wanted. Chaos drafts, just saying. And I was just sitting next to them playing standard, and we're just talking about stuff.
Gotcha. All right, so let's get deep here. So you sit down, and how did Pack 1 go? And feel free to give us as much detail as you can remember as well. I know our listeners will appreciate, any details you have.
Right. Okay. So we're in a world's draft for multiple thousands of dollars. You're going to a first booster, and the card you open as a rare is Apathemia. Aphemia. Yeah. So that is by far the best card you can ever open, considering uncommons and commons. So we basically picked that. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Great open. Yeah. Really good card.
So we're really happy about this. So that is a good start. And then the next booster already is a doozy, because it's basically empty besides an omen, the black omen, and a fateful end, which is a red instant that deals 3 damage. Both cards are fine. Fateful end is definitely something I would like to pick up, but it's not black. And I actually think this is one of the things where card evaluation changes becoming your first pick. I really like the omen specifically compared with like Ephemia, right? It's such a beautiful combination of being enchantment, getting her back, and then being secure later, and it's beautiful. So I actually was
that
very
is great synergy.
I was very torn in that pick, and I decided to go with the red removal spell for the reason of being really more open to colors. In this set, when I'm drafting black, I really want a backup plan, because black is so good that a lot of people before you can go into black. So I didn't think that Omen was good enough to not have that secondary option. And Fateful End is a great card, and a lot of the archetypes it's good. It's just a very solid card. So we picked up that, and we were pretty happy at that point. Third pick is very sad for us. Basically, we have nothing but a lot of commons, and the best card in the pack is a Shoal Kraken, right? The 3/5. When enchantment enters the battlefield, you may loot. Right, draw a card, discard a card. And there was probably something like a decent common, like a minor common, like a 4/3 or a 2/3 that gets better. So it was basically the best card, and it also pairs well with Ephemia, right? Because you want to play a lot of enchantments, and you want to see a lot of enchantment enter the battlefield and go to the graveyard. So that keeps me open. Black-blue is a combination I like. Red-blue can be very decent. So it's a good pickup for a draft. Like, so far, we're very happy, right? We have three very solid cards. We have every direction we go, and that's fine. And now comes kind of the pick that has a little bit of history to it, which I also want to elaborate a little. And that's, I think, a thing that a lot of people don't know. Do you have your opening pack from the beginning? The Kraken booster. Do you still have that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Go through the comments. And I will tell you, this is always the case. Every booster in every format since like 4 years ago or something has a row of comments that has every color once. And I think it's red, green, white, black, blue. Like, it's always the same. Every booster you open has...
Yeah, there actually is one here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in a row and it's always the same. Every booster has that. That leads to a thing that if you're missing a black comment in your booster, you know that somebody must have picked that.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
So if for example, you get, which is very important, like in the second pick, you have no black comment, you probably can assess that the person in front of you took a Maya's Grasp or a Final Death.
Yes.
Which is super important, specifically pick 2. So
really important, especially because of how often that happens in the format where somebody moves into black and
specifically also in this format. Like they're basically like white has apathy, red has the enchantment, green has like the Warbriar's blessing. So each color has at least a card where it happens. It doesn't happen too often, but when it happens, you feel very happy about it. So I was seeing that this card pack was missing a black comment. So I knew that either person in front of me from the 3 picks must have picked the black common, and there was also a rare missing and an uncommon. So I know one of those picked them, and it's likelier that the person closer to me took it than somebody else, because rares usually and uncommons are better than even the better commons.
Right.
So I was thinking, okay, that's kind of annoying that black is drying up. So I picked a Caliphi, Beloved of the Sea, which is the X3 that has blue devotion and makes a target over it, which is not super great, but also not bad. But I was saying, okay, if somebody took black in front of me, I'll try blue, right? So, and then...
So this is pretty reasonable.
Yes, exactly. So, and then everything kind of went really sad, because the next boosters were super empty. Like, the next booster had a Soul Reaper of Mogus, which is not a really good 5th pick. I mean, you're not sad about it, but it's not that bad. Then we have an Aureate of Mountain's Blaze, which is the 1/3 that makes Rummage for 3 mana, which is also not a pick you really want to have.
No.
Then you have a Minion's Return, which gets a creature back when it dies. Heroes of the Rebel, which is the 4/4 that makes a token and has the hero ability. So all of those cards, like, we can see that those were kind of the best options from the pack, but they're really underwhelming. Like, super. So, like, if when I looked at the first pick, like, pack I had, I was doing like, okay, like, either the colors are not open, or like I just don't see it. And there have been cards that were on the same power level from white and green and stuff, but I was sticking to red and black because I already had Apathemia and Fateful, right? So I realized that kind of white was not really there. And maybe blue, but in the end, I was not happy about the first booster at all, right?
Okay, yeah.
So that's the state where we are. And then second booster, ding, 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 ding.
Here's the big moment.
Yeah. So the way I also count down the cards in piles of 4, you see the rare like almost immediately, because it's like the 5th card in the booster or something. So I open it up, and then I see like uncommon Dream Trawler. I'm like, okay.
Boom. Yeah. Boom. So Dream Trawler. Now, I have to know, like, is your initial reaction to seeing that Dream Trawler, oh, yes? Or is it like, oh, God?
No.
What am I going to have to... Because you're pretty far away from it at this point, but it's also arguably the best card in the set, right? It's like,
yes. No, it's further... It's like, somebody else is going to... Like, I'm not happy about seeing this card, because the way my draft goes is not allowing me to pick that in almost every case. Almost every case, you say?
Right.
So I looked through the pack, and this was actually like this. is more dramatic on the outside than on the inside. That pack was completely empty. There was nothing I would have considered picking.
No.
The only other card, like, no, really, like the next best pick would have been like a 4/3 enchantment vanilla, which I already had.
The Marauder? Oh,
yes.
No.
Which I already had 2 off from the first booster. So,
oh my God, that's 2 more than you really want to play anyway. That's incredible.
I mean, this is just, you look at this, it's like, okay, the only other card that was supremely playable was a Staggering Insight.
Okay, sure.
So, I mean, I have 2 blue-white cards in my, like,
unbelievable.
So I was actually, there was no other chance. I could not, I mean, I was still reveling in like sadness from actually having to make the pick, but there was no other chance I would have not picked that Dream Trawler. It was not possible. But I was not planning on using it because, like, on the third pick, I passed a red-white hero to Andre. So I was fairly sure he picked it up because that booster, when we took the Show Kraken, that was kind of empty. So I was assessing he was also in white and red. So I was not expecting Andre to pass me many white cards. And end up he was mono red, so he could have, but it's this. And then the boosters come. The next booster is actually really like the only other interesting pick, I would say, because we had the choice between a Red Omen and the Stinging Lionfish. The 2/1 that when you cast a spell on your opponent, then you can tap or untap something.
Right.
And that is kind of the point where, like, I can take Dream Trawler, and since I already have 2 blue cards, I can still make it work. It's not pretty, and it really needs some luck and form of open colors, but it could still work. You only have to get to like 20 cards realistically. So.
And just to recap, though, so you've taken Dream Trawler. You're not currently planning on playing it, and you're pretty sad that you had to use your pick on that because of how far away you are color-wise.
Exactly, yes.
But you're not completely shutting off the option in case things do come together because, boy, that really does seem like much better than the direction things have gone prior. And how your win percentage spikes if you can actually put a Dream Trawler onto the battlefield at any point. So,
like, if my first booster would have been anything better, like, I would say randomly 20% better, right, than it was before. Or I would have had like a slightly better pick in my first pick. None of this would have happened.
Yeah.
But since
incredible.
Like all of
it happened in the biggest draft ever. It's unbelievable. You must have just been sitting there shaking your head like, how did this happen?
Yeah. I think there's actually video of it where I just like you showed it on the cover, where like, all right, I mean, I didn't choose this, but this is how it is. But I'm still like, okay, great.
And I was actually standing there in the room. I was taking notes on our feature drafter for your pod, which was Piotr. And and it was funny because we had a few of the video producers in the room because, we did do a pretty extensive video feature on
which was
your
great,
draft.
By the way. Like the whole limited coverage.
I loved the direction that's going, and I think it'll even get better once it's all on Arena. I talked to the producer behind it, and he seems to think that we could really do some extra cool stuff once it's all Arena based, especially. Awesome. But at any rate, he came by and showed me his phone. And he just said, Thoralf just picked Dream Trawler and he's black red. And I was like, but we have to maintain composure because there's players around and we're in the thing. So I just looked at it and just looked back to my iPad. But in my head, I was going, what? What just happened?
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway. I agree. I'm sitting there and it's like, okay, is there a hidden camera? But actually there are a lot of cameras, but none of them is hidden. But it feels like, of every draft imaginable in the world, why does it need to be this one,
Yes. Why this one? Okay. So now you're moving on to the next pick and you've got an Omen or a Lionfish, you said? Those are the two options?
Yes, exactly. And this was kind of the thing where you have to make a small decision because, like, if you really want to make Dream Trawler work, you need to pick up playables. Like, it's not that you go like, I cannot take this. But also the Red Omen, it's kind of good. Like, it's fine. It's like a solid B- or something, right?
Yeah, the first Red Omen is a card you want in your deck. Yeah,
exactly. But like you're also not sad about not having it. Like 2 damage is not missing on 2 damage. Not the worst of it.
Yeah, but I was not a Myra's Grasp.
Yeah, but I was figuring it's like, okay, if I'm picking up something like Brew from Andre, if I'm picking up an open color, that can be much more rewarding, and I need to have like an open line to get a deck together anyway. So if I feel, okay, blue is open, maybe white is open, and I pick the line, I still have a solid option of doing that. But if I take the omen, I'm basically out. Like I have to prioritize.
Yes.
And my black and red just didn't feel strong enough that I wanted to make that decision on that specific point. So I said, okay, if I end up with a black-red deck because black and red was open, I'm probably missing that omen a little amount, but it wouldn't be too bad.
Right.
So I was going with the lionfish, which is
and this
also,
still leaves you with blue-black option, right?
which is also like specifically the lionfish. It's a blue enchantment, which means it triggers the Ephemia and the show kraken, which I already know I would play if I played Dream Trawler.
There you go. Yeah,
So-
good pick. I like that. That's good logic.
Yeah, and from that moment on, basically red was not accessible because Omni was black, red, my red, mono red, and there was just no red, black card I wanted to pick. Like the whole booster was just really. I was trying to find an open lane for black. Like the next pick was a liar, which I would have picked anyway, and I was really happy that I picked the pick because it made me stay open one more time. And then, yeah, and then it was probably something blue mediocre, like Deny the Divine, a Witness of Tomorrow, like something around this, which is okay in a deck, but it's really not something you would have liked, like about this stage of the draft, right?
Right.
So it's not really a signal, but it was just something. So the rest of the booster was some blue cards and some white cards, which left me a bit dry in the third booster because all of them was also blue-white, which also makes sense because I passed them the Staggering Insight, and if they were before, they certainly won't go out now. And
yes.
Looking at also the boosters I got, even in the third booster, that's definitely hindsight, but I never got to see a Mildcraft or a Final Death or anything that was relevant for a very good red-black deck. So the deck I actually got in the end, even though it was like a 2-pack pile of mediumness, was probably the best I could have gotten in that specific seat.
Incredible.
Which is
and disappointing, right? That
right,
because you know how it is. Like you can practice, but there's usually one seat at a draft that is just it is going to be difficult, right? Like the cards aren't going to flow the right way, or you're going to get kind of set up where you open a sweet black card, but the opponent passing to you also open up a sweet black card, and you're going to be kind of facing that the whole time, or
right.
There's just these things that are outside of your control, right?
Yeah, and you probably also, like you specifically probably remember the draft. The decks weren't that good. Like they had significantly lower value of grades than the other draft, which was just stronger packs. Maybe people switching one fewer times or something. I don't actually really quite know how everything went, but it was just clear that our power level was just lower, but also the deck isn't that bad because the different, like you gave it a D, which is fine, but a D doesn't mean it's like significantly worse than a B. You can still win. It's still Magic.
Yeah,
it looks more dramatic.
It does, because it was interesting because your table was what you said. The packs were lower. You switching definitely changed things for some of the players around you. For example, we gave you a D for two reasons. One, your mana, right, was just tough. You did end up picking a little bit of fixing, so it wasn't like a complete disaster, but it was tough, right? There would be times when you had Dream Trawler in your hand and couldn't cast it, for example.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then the other one was you had to scrap it out for playables. But here's the interesting thing. Nobody at your table got an A from us. Yeah, so like you said, and it is relative, right? If yours a D, but the best deck at the table is a C, you're fine. Now in this case, some people did get, there was one with a B or a B plus or something, but you were in range. Like if you would have picked up 2 wins with that deck, I would not have been surprised. I would have been like, wow, nice job. You got there, like it came together. Because if I laid out like either a good mana draw or the good half of your deck, the good half of your deck was great.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you had Ephemia, you had Dream Trawler, you had a bunch of really good stuff. But then, you had to dip down and play some, kind of just junky cards to fill out your curve and a few things like that. But you were like, I would not have been shocked at all. Where if you look at the other table from Worlds, there was, I think, 2 A's. I think Mengucci and somebody else. I think Mengucci and maybe Andre, we gave an A or an A minus or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, how did Mengucci play with his A? Just saying.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. and that's it. So, and I mean, this was something, of course, that we were doing for, for the piece, they were like, here, grade these decks. And Paul and I are like, okay, that's hard to do, right? Like we're trying to figure it out. We actually had to change some of our grades too, because, the little behind the scenes here, but because of the way the production went on it, our initial grades, we had to give them before actually seeing the decks. So what we had done is, we got to see the picks. So we had the pick list in front of us. And then also, just for research reasons or whatever, Paul and I went around the table to each player as they were building, just to check in and just to get a little info. Hey, how'd your draft go? Or what are we looking at? We can't really say too much to the players where they're building because we can't interfere, but we can ask, are you happy? Are you sad? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that let us see at least an initial layout of how each player had their deck laid out. So we had an idea, but then we got to see them later and we went and changed some of the grades as well. But anyway, wow, man, incredible that this actually happened to you and at such a not opportune time.
You take what you get, right? I'm actually very proud how I managed that seed. And it's bittersweet, but in the end, the games actually were really close. I lost both of them, 1-2, and against Seth, I couldn't do much. Seth had 2 of the apathies and 2 of the flickers, which conveniently handles the only real card I have in my deck for like late game reasons. So, yeah. As soon as I looked at the deck, it was like, okay, you're basically throwing your whole draft to have Dream Trawler, and then your opponent has like 4 ways of getting rid of it. So it just
right, yeah. And we should mention that if you use Rise from Glory or Flicker of Fate on a Dreadful Apathy, when it comes back in, it doesn't actually target. It just becomes attached to a permanent. So even if Thoralf would have given his Dream Trawler hexproof, it still would have the apathy on it. So it's one of the few ways. I wouldn't call it a clean answer, but it's one of the few ways you can answer.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the nicest ones you can assemble.
And he ended up running 2 apathy, 2 flicker, right?
Yes, exactly. So it was fairly
what a nightmare.
Since Dream Trawler is also a late game card, it's fairly easy that he drew like a combination of both until like turn 13 or something. Yeah. So I lost like the first game I lost really closely, I think, and then the second game I won. And there was still so much game left to play. And against Autumn, I definitely know I drew the last game, which I could have won. So the deck was definitely on the upside of playable.
Yeah, and I have to say I was really impressed, and even more so now hearing some more of the detail from you about how you did manage that seat, because I think that part of the narrative, became, oh, well, Thoralf just, had black red and just dumped it all for this Dream Trawler and just moved all in or whatever, which is kind of the one sentence thing. But I knew that wasn't what was happening, because I knew that you drafted a whole lot and stuff. Then you wouldn't just be like, hey, it's Dream Trawler. What am I supposed to do? Like, that's not, people that draft a lot don't have that mentality. They approach it like how you did, where it's like, look, this is basically a throwaway pick, so I'm just going to take it. But you really do owe it to your draft to keep your eye open. And the pick that really signifies that to me was the Lionfish over the Red Omen, right? Like that to me it really shows that you understood, exactly what you were doing with doing it. But a seat like that is really, really hard. I mean, is there a scenario that you can imagine where if you had been prescient about what was going on, you would have drafted differently and come away with some like amazing deck? It feels like kind of no matter what you did, you were going to have to be swimming upstream here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it easy to kind of like accept, right? I know that it would have been a little more stinky if then all of a sudden the third booster would have been insanely black and red. And I still figure that my decision would have been good, but at least I don't sit there and it's like, oh man, I could have had that really good deck, but in the end I was too greedy for Dream Trawler. No, there was fortunately no reason to think that. And I mean,
Yeah.
as an arena boy, basically, or doing a lot of the things, I know that coverage is mostly like a little bit exaggerating on stuff. So I'm not really
Yeah.
mad at selling the point exactly what it feels like of
Yeah.
the dramatic point of view. But I think I find it very amusing. And then there was I said, okay, why if people are having fun with it, I also had fun and posted like the picture of the Dream Trawler, which got like a very sad ending for the Dream Trawler, but like
Yeah. Are you going to be auctioning that thing off or what? I
yeah,
said I was interested. I mean, I'm in. Like, give me
yeah,
a.
I think that is going to happen, which I find like a very awesome solution to the whole thing. So I'm not quite sure how, and maybe somebody knows how to do that. Like, I'm looking for the best system for it, but I want to basically auction off the 4 parts of the Dream Trawler and spend that to charity. So at least it did its value, if not for
I
me, for
love that.
somebody else. Yeah.
I love that idea. And I got to get a piece of the draft history. I mean, that is just an incredible, story. And I mean, again, it happened in the most important draft ever.
Yeah.
And thankfully we did that other draft coverage because that was one of the things that really stood out to me. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I'll find a link of the piece that went up. And it was that, when you do draft coverage of a certain player, in this case, we had 2 different draft pods, and they chose Pyotr Glogovsky as the featured drafter for one, and then Javier Dominguez for the other. But both of their drafts were fine. They had some decision points. It's still draft. It's still interesting. But in both tables, there was really interesting things happening elsewhere. And in your table's case, it was in your seat, right? I mean, like if we just would have randomly picked and it was like, hey, we're going to watch Thoralf's draft. Okay, cool. I mean, I would have just been freaking out, right, in the booth. And it would have been this like insane storyline to watch. And that's usually happening at one seat at the table. It's just, you can only realistically cover one.
Which also lets you, like, there are a lot of weird conspiracy theories, right? So if people look like, oh, the boosters, like I read that somewhere, were like predetermined, because I also remember that I think Piotr opened 3 in color rares.
He did, correct? Yeah, 3 red rares, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so people go like, oh yeah, of course you have a coverage for that, and this is so rigged and something like that. Don't you think they would have probably like also looked at my seat for that reason and like done some of this, like, because
I've always seen. I've seen that. I've seen those things online before, and I always just laugh because, if they were going to rig it, they would rig it way cooler than that. Also, I've seen how they handle the packs and stuff leading up, and it is, it's very, very precise. They have a high level of security. They are very specific about it, and it is funny that people think that they would rig it, and then the end result would be a player open 2 tectonic giants or whatever. Oh wow, and an ox of Agonis or whatever. Like those are, it's like, okay, that was kind of interesting, but the truth of it is, that's not that interesting, because you know what he did? Not. He took all of them. Yeah, He just was like, sure, I'll take these. Yeah, it's like, there's nothing really to talk about. Yeah. So
pro Magic player picking the best rares.
Yeah. A couple more questions before we finish up here. First, was it fun to play at Worlds and draft at Worlds? Did you have fun with it?
I said that before, and I said, like, if I thought it would be as much fun as it was, I probably would have tried harder. It was absolutely insane. Wizard, like, so many stuff to make us comfortable, whole experience, the luau, and like all the things around it, the experience, the place, Hawaii, just generally felt like this is once in a lifetime experience. And I mean, it's a bit silly to say like you should try qualifying, but it's definitely something nobody can ever take away, and it was brilliant.
That's awesome. And then how did the tournament ended up going for you overall?
So I O2'd the draft. And that means I was in the lower bracket, and then I managed to 2-1 the next standard, which
Mm-hmm.
qualified for the next day. And then I O2'd that standard and became like 12th or something. So,
Okay, so you made day two, which is, I have to say, an achievement in and of itself. I mean, look at the
right.
players that didn't make day two, and they're all really good players.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Like, you cannot be mad at yourself, whatever happens. But I was saying, like,
Yeah.
I want to get that one more step of prize money, that day two, and then I'm completely fine with myself.
Yeah. Well, great job, and it was really, really fun to watch you. Also, I have to say, you did an interview with Becca. And it went over really well. And a lot of people, both behind the scenes and in front, were like, I want to see more of this guy. Like, he seems like a nice guy, And I'm like, have you met him? Like, don't you remember when he won the Mythic Championship? He's super nice. And so, yeah, I think you're going to be getting some phone calls or something for interviews and maybe some other stuff down the line. So.
Great.
So great job with that too. You marketed yourself well or something.
It's just a thing, right? Magic is just so much more enjoyable when you're living through fun with it. And I can see people like, I want to win and stuff. When it's like, yeah, but you also want to have like a great time. So
Yeah.
the way the combination works for me is just whenever I'm playing competitive, I have a lot of fun anyway. I know that your background is also a little bit from poker, and sometimes you cannot do anything against losing a lot, and your mindset needs to be stable against that. So if you're saying like, okay, you have a rough day in Magic, but imagine also having fun, that wasn't a waste of time.
Yes. I'll keep that in mind. By the way, I actually have decided to go to the Grand Prix in Reno this weekend to play.
Yeah,
and it's Theros Beyond Death. Yeah, I actually wasn't going to because I was doing too much travel. And I just wanted to be home, but I got badgered into it. So I booked it yesterday. So I'm hopefully open a good pool. But I'll think of you midway through the day when I'm like 2-2 and wondering what I'm doing with my life. And I'll be like, hey, I should be having fun.
There's always mystery drafts.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Yes. I got to do kind of a top secret one of those yesterday here in, let's just say, the greater Seattle area. And that was my 5th mystery booster draft. And it is awesome. That format is so fun. So also, maybe, I opened Grave Titan, so
So this is not far away from Chaos Draft, I'm just saying. Like,
yes, yeah, you're a big Chaos Draft fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I know you're kind of reluctant. I think there was like a sign off on Chaos Draft or something, like where you both said like how bad like silly Chaos Draft is. You never have synergies and stuff, but.
Yeah, that's the thing I don't like. I feel like it's a race to the bottom. Like my decks always end up being really kind of bread and butter, right? Like, oh, this creature has power and toughness. This is a removal spell. Just a bunch of a pile of the best cards that I can assemble, where I look at the pack and there's like a really cool synergy card, but I'm like, well, I'm not going to get any other energy or poison or artifacts or whatever. And so I don't, or a tribe or something. So I don't commit to them. And I end up drafting decks that are fine, but just, and I don't mind them. Like, I actually like playing that type of Magic a fair bit, like, think like core set Magic or something like that. But I don't find it as repeatable. Like, it doesn't make me want to come back and do it over and over and over again. It makes it more like a novelty for me, where like, if I'm at a GP and they're like, hey, we're doing Chaos Draft, I'm like, cool, let's try one, right? Like, that'll be fun. Or if it comes up on Magic Online, I might do one. But on like Cube or the regular set, I'll do 50. I mean, I'll just do it over and over and over and over and over. And Chaos doesn't do that. Mystery Booster, though, is this weird mix where it's like Chaos Draft, but all the cards are really good. Yeah. And so then I just will do it as many times as I can,
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the idea. Also, that it combines the wackiness, and since they also have like I think 1,000 and something cards, like the variants of the cards.
There's 1,700 total.
Yeah, it's like insane. Like imagine how many. Like imagine you actually would have to train for that. How many drafts you would have made to see like.
I know. People keep asking us if we're going to do a set review for Mystery Booster.
So that's a 24-hour stream or something.
Yeah, it's like a month of shows or whatever. But yeah, I told them no, we will not be doing that. All right, Thoralf, well, let's call it a show here. First things first. Very much I wanted to say thank you for coming on the show. You were a great guest, and it was our pleasure to have you on. Where can people find you? Where can they, if they want to say hi, if they want to follow you on social media or look at your content or whatever, where can they find you?
So I'm on Twitter at ToffleMTG. You can write or stuff. I'm not the most active, but I usually reply to comments, specifically ones that insult Riley or Jamin, which are the Arena Boys. We have that show on channelfireball.com. So if you enjoy kind of, well, we call it serious magic for winners. It's basically wacky, serious magic where we just take devs that aren't really good enough for standard and make them a bit worse so they're funny. And it's very entertaining. And that's the two words. Sometimes I write articles. I wrote one for Channel Fireball about the Mythic Championship and stuff. If you're in Berlin, I mean, that also counts kind of. So if you're at any of the players' tours, say hi. That's me.
Okay, and I'll make sure to put a link to your Twitter and for the Arena Boy stuff in the description too. So if people want to check it out, they can find it. So once again, thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And hopefully we'll have you on again soon. That was fun. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff we can talk about besides Dream Trawler that that ended up getting ripped in 4 pieces or whatever.
I mean that Dream Trawler. I'm not the one who looks at like followers and stuff, and I don't care about it, but like that happened, and then there's like, oh, this stuff, and then people talking about it, the coverage and stuff. It was definitely very like that is my first experience something really viral. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was like it was similar having been on the coverage team and just been like, this is the story of this draft, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the most incredible thing, to have happen to somebody at a draft this big. And it was fun to be any part of it at all. But that poor Dream Trawler. And hey, when you do figure out how to do the thing, make sure you tweet about it and everything, and I'll help signal boost it for you too, so that our listeners.
I expect it to be somewhat next week. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be really fun. That's going to do it for this one. If you want to find me on social media, I'm Marshall_LR. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. Also, make sure you check out Channel Fireball for awesome free content. Thoralf just mentioned the Arena Boys. That's just one of the many ways that you can consume content on Channel Fireball. I do draft videos on there. This podcast, of course, appears there. There's written articles and videos by some of the best players and content producers in the world right there on the front page of Channel Fireball for free every single day. So please do check that out and enjoy getting better. We talked about, some of the best ways to improve is to keep up on the content and everything, get those win percentages up. And this is just yet another way for you to do that. Check them out at channelfireball.com. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
So, I heard of a certain tradition, Is this how it goes? You just
this
start with something.
It goes. Yes.
All right. There we go. Okay. First of all, I don't know if you noticed, but throughout the whole episode, I opened boosters just randomly and just left them here.
I did hear something in the background, and I thought, maybe he just needed like an energy bar. He's getting tired or hungry.
No.
Those were boosters you were opening the whole time?
I didn't even look at the ray. I just opened them and left them here next to it. It's like,
oh my God. That is unbelievable.
We got a Temple of Enlightenment. Great.
This is so rude. I can't believe all those nice things I said about you,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, I still stand by them, but this is a major setback for our relationship, Thoralf. We're on the rocks.
No, every good duo, like every good interaction needs to like a light and a dark side. You cannot go with which is.
Oh, you found the dark side, all right. Cracking packs around me for no value is a good way to. No, I do.
Okay, so what I wanted to do is because So you said actually quite interesting. You said you can't really do mystery drafts, and since I love doing chaos drafts and mystery drafts, so it doesn't matter. I collected the 5 most important tips you should know if you have no idea what you're doing and want to start them.
Oh, all right. Let's do it.
All right. So, number 1, colorless fixing is broken. And this is something that people probably don't remember because it's not modern times magic. There's fixing that is colorless and super powerful. The signets, for example, you know them from cube drafts, right? I mean, Imagine in vintage cube draft, signets were like a first pick almost because they were so good. And I like specifically in like Modern Masters packs when they're around the chaos drafts, signets just go very late, like 4th, 5th pick, and they really shouldn't be. Like this is, if you see it Signet, it's probably better than a lot of the removal spells, even no matter how good they are.
Oh
Same
man,
goes
I take
for
Signet so high.
yeah. Same goes for bounce lands, like the Ravnica bounce lands in the
Those are
modern.
broken.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But people go like, oh, that's just a land, and like there's like Lightning Bolt is definitely not as good as a bounce land if you have it in one of the boosters, because I think
Right.
Modern Masters has those together. So they're really strong, and the power level is kind of hidden. There's colorless land cycling also in mystery boosters that have like basic land cycling or cycling for a certain basic land type, even though the cards themselves aren't really great. But the like looking for basic land opens your draft up to so many other cards you can play. There's like a 6 mana, which costs 1 blue, 3/4 flyer that looks for an island if you cycle it for 2 colorless.
Yep.
Even let's say, even if you have nothing in your deck besides an island and this card, you could still always play it, because either you draw the island and you can play it as a 3/4 flyer, or you can cycle for the island. Like, it's not the best option, but it's still free. And then if you ever pick up something blue that is really good, you can just pick it and play it. It's like, those are just very, very good. Second, you like, because you said there's less synergy, the decks turned out to be even more mid-rangey than normal draft decks are. Like, I think there's a saying from Ben Stark or something, every limited deck is mid-range, which is certainly very true. But even more so in those decks, since it's very hard to combine very aggressive archetypes, since you're missing all the one-drops that maybe a set supplies on, like, if you drafted set alone, you cannot have them from all the sets basically together. So less aggressive decks means you should probably almost never play a 2-drop. Like, there are some 2-drops that are just good enough to play on their own, but if it's like a 2-mana 2/2 that has a slight upside, like the thing that in the new set can't be blocked by enchantment creatures, something like that, never play it, because it's just not worth the thing.
Right.
Because it's very slow, you should also pick up the like more expensive cards in general. You say like, oh, 6 mana, I can never cast that in certain formats, and that's basically true. But your curve goes much higher because people are less aggressive, so you can afford to basically, like, whenever you think something is too expensive, think about it as one lower in a normal draft format. So if you have a 5-drop and you think like, oh, for 5 that's kind of bad, think about it, would it be good in like a modern day format as a 4-drop? And if that's true, it's probably also still a good card. And you still have some really good ramp spells, like Signets, for example, or Rampant Growth, like some cards they wouldn't even print nowadays, that are very good in drafting and make you have your curves better. Okay, number 4. If you draft, you have to look out more for open colors, because nowadays usually a color supports 2 kind of topics of a deck, and the commons line up going either in one deck and not the other, or like being distributed. So even if you're in the same color, sometimes if you have a different archetype, you still can pick up the same color as somebody next to you. And this is not the case in any of those drafts. Like, you want to pick a solid card, and if you're in blue and your right neighbor is in blue, then the best blue card get taken and you cannot get out of it. So it's more important than in any other draft that you're in open colors and you watch out for it. And number 5, pick Spot Swarm. It's a good card. No, I think I've seen people pass Spot Swarm so much, and it's just a rogue card. No, just like when you ever risk your draft in Chaos Draft, don't look at prices that much, and don't look at like what cards really do as a percentage wise. Just if you look at a card and say like, wow, that looks fun, just play it. Try and make it happen. And it's certainly, it's not a world's draft. Every pick is super important. It's just something you might give up some percentage point and pick like I've played so many weird cards that are just normally happen. Like, okay, I know I'm the wrong person to talk to, but when we had like the world's mystery draft, I played 48 cards because I really had no idea what to cut, So, and all of the cards looked great, and I didn't want to deck myself, and it was a blue deck, like there was.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So do those drafts, and they're really great.
All right. Hopefully, I won't have to use your advice this weekend at the GP, but if I do, I'll be glad I have it.
48 cards.